10 days before Christmas, from the top of the stairs, I listened as my son told his wife once the doctor signs Dad's done. We'll get the house before the new year. My house. The one I built with these hands 40 years ago. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Just stood there listening to the two people I loved most discuss how to erase me. They thought age had made me slow. They forgot. It made me patient. By Christmas Eve, I had a surprise gift for them, the kind that makes their life collapse. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The wood under my palm felt familiar and strange at once. I had sanded this banister myself back when my wife was alive. The grain rose like a gentle river, patient, honest. Upstairs, the voices lowered, then sharpened. Lucas felt closest to the railing, his words falling down the stairwell in controlled drops. Lydia spoke in clean, clipped pieces, the way people practice a lie until it sounds like policy. 3 words changed everything. Capacity evaluation. And then a name. Dr. Grant Ellison. I knew that name like I knew my own. He had signed off on my physicals when I still worked jobs that needed a steady hand and a clear head. I had not seen him in over 2 years. That name coming from my son's mouth felt like a key turning in a lock I never gave him. He won't even know what hit him, Lucas whispered. I stood at the landing and answered nothing. My body learned stillness in the Navy and precision in the field. When a structure shows a hairline crack, you do not shout. You study the load and you plan where to shift it. That is how you save a bridge. Sometimes that is also how you end one. Footsteps crossed my office above me. I backed away from the stairs 1 slow inch at a time, careful of the boards that announce a man who has something to hear. In the laundry room, the air smelled like detergent and dust. I counted 6 breaths. Then 6 more. The garage door clicked open just enough to let the desert night slide in. I sat in the truck, hands loose on my knees, and watched the dashboard clock move 1 minute forward. A minute can be heavy when a life changes inside it. When I came back through the side door, the kitchen lights were on. Lucas stood with his back to the fridge, casual, that careful kind of casual that has a plan tucked into it. "How was the checkup, Dad?" "Routine," I said. "Blood pressure is boring." He smiled without his eyes. "Lydia stirred a pot and said we should host Christmas Eve this year. I said we should. There is a special kind of calm that visits a man right before a storm he chooses. We ate like any other evening. News on the television. Forks, plates, a laugh that did not belong to anything real. I watched their hands. Lydia's fingers rested on her phone like it might deliver her a future." Lucas kept his voice soft. "Maybe it's time we took care of things for you," he said. "That's exactly what I'm doing," I said. No one blinked. After dinner, I wiped the counter clean and placed the dish towel over the sink just so. The house settled. Houses do that when night finds them. A long whisper along the beams. A sigh in the vents. I walked down the hall to my office and stood in the doorway for a long time. The framed blueprint on the wall showed a truss I designed years ago. Every line had a purpose. Every joint carried what it must and nothing more. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, the paper gleamed like bone. In the hall, I heard Lydia's voice again, thin and bright. She said the packet will be ready by Monday. She said the signature would be quick since Dr. Ellison knows our family. Lucas said once the paper is signed, the judge will have nothing to argue. He said by the new year we will be living like normal people. I did not know what normal meant in their mouths. The words sounded like a place where I did not exist. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress gave under my weight and returned to a different shape. My wife's side stayed quiet, a silence that never stopped surprising me. I took the small black notebook from the drawer and opened it to a fresh page. The pen rested between my fingers as if it had been waiting for this moment since the first nail I drove into this house. I wrote 1 line. "They are building a cage for me. I will design the door." It is a strange thing to listen to your own child map your erasure. It does not come like thunder. It arrives like paperwork. An appointment time was scribbled in a calendar, a witness you shared holidays with, a voice at the top of your stairs saying the old man will not even know what hit him. "I know," I said into the room, "and that is the problem. Not that I did not know, that I knew too well." I moved through the house with the lights off. The path from bedroom to kitchen is a story my feet could tell without my help. I rinsed the coffee pot and set it up for morning like every other night of my life here. Routine is a shoreline. Even when the tide is wrong, it gives you something to look at. On the fridge was a magnet from a bridge dedication in Tempe. I took it down and put it in my pocket. You keep the small things that remind you of who you were when no one needed what you had. The clock on the microwave said 10:17. The hall clock said 10:15. The hall clock has always believed in a past that was 2 minutes kinder. I let it win. Upstairs, a door closed, then another. The water in the bathroom ran and stopped. The heater turned on. The vents carried warm air through the bones of the house I built and wanted to keep building. I stood under the archway between the kitchen and the living room and remembered the first night I walked through here with fresh paint on my hands and a wife whose laugh filled corners I had not yet sanded smooth. I turned the dimmer down until the room thinned to a soft gray. The stairwell fell into shadow. I took one step back, then another. The light clicked off and left me in the dark. In the hush, the house spoke the only language left. A tick from the wall clock, a soft breath returning through the ducts. I listened to the sound of everything I loved being measured. Then I did what a man does when the weights are wrong. I began to move them. I built this house with my own hands, but somehow it stopped belonging to me. The cedar rails still hold the warmth of summer sun. The oak boards still breathe at night the way timber does when it settles into itself. If I close my eyes, I can still smell primer and sap and a little gasoline from the old generator that kept our lights on the first winter. Yet standing here now, the air feels borrowed, like I am visiting a place that remembers me but does not claim me. I walk the hallway slowly, and the pictures along the wall tell the story I used to believe. Margaret, with paint on her wrists, is holding a roller like a flag. Lucas at 8 in a cardboard helmet beating a wooden spoon against a mixing bowl drum. My hand on his shoulder was steady and proud. The light through the front windows falls in thin ribs across the floor. It slides through the blinds and breaks into modest gold. The house knows the hour and answers with this gentle shine. I used to take that as a blessing. Tonight it looks like a line drawn by a careful stranger to separate what was mine from what is no longer offered. The refrigerator hums. The heater sighs and sends warm breath along the baseboards. In the quiet, I hear the softest grit under my shoes. Sawdust that never quite left. 19 winters ago, I sealed the windows against a desert wind and thought I had sealed us in against loss. I tell myself a truth that does not feel like comfort. A man spends a lifetime building walls to keep the world out, and somehow his own blood finds a way in. I open the side door and the night leans against me. The garage smells like oil and dry leaves. 2 bins sit under the workbench where I keep the clamps and the old level I cannot throw away. Trash in one, recycling in the other. I lift the lid and the kitchen follows me out there. Coffee grounds are dark and wet. Eggshells. Onion skins. Then a corner of manila shows itself where it has no right to be. The top of a form with a line for the patient's name. The line is not empty. My name sits there calm as a cut stone. Capacity evaluation. The words come up like cold water in my throat. I lay the papers on the workbench and the fluorescent light turns them gray. Pages clipped together. Boxes checked with a pen that presses too hard. Language that tries to sound clinical and lands on cruel. Alleged decline. Concerns about judgment. A recommendation that someone else make the choices a man has earned the right to make for himself. At the bottom, a signature. Grant Ellison, M.D. It looks like his hand, but not his conscience. He used to shake my palm and look in my eyes when I passed a physical before a job that put lives on steel. He would not call a man gone without seeing him standing and speaking and thinking clearly, not the Ellison I knew. I feel the old training that taught me how to look at a seam and tell whether it will hold. Rage is a bad welder. Patience is a better one. I press the papers flat and read them twice. The language is neat and empty the way a room gets when someone moves out and leaves only dust circles where a life used to sit. I place the pages exactly as they were under the cereal box and the pizza flyer and the holiday catalog that pretends family is a sweater you can buy in 2 sizes. I close the lid. My hands do not shake. My heart does not race. The body learns at sea to be the quietest thing in a storm. Back inside the house, I stand at the kitchen window. The glazing I fixed 3 summers ago has not cracked. The frame still holds the glass like a steady hand. Light from the street lamp knifes through the blinds and lays a thin ladder on the sink. If hope exists tonight, it is no larger than those little rungs of light. I lift the blind 2 inches. Outside the driveway looks like a riverbank after the water has gone. Tire marks where Lucas parked. a dark crescent under the bumper where oil once left the truth of an engine that needed care. When we first moved in, Margaret loved this window best. She said a home is proven by the small view it gives you while you wash a plate. She said, if you can love that slice of the world, you can love the rest. I found it easy then. I find it harder now. A son who takes your name and signs it on a document that turns you into a problem to be solved is not a slice of the world a man can love. I lower the blind and the light becomes a thinner blade. Then I press the slat and the room folds into softness. The gold lines vanish. The counter changes from river to stone. My reflection in the dark glass looks like a man who stepped out of a photograph and forgot how to smile. I leave the window and cross the room to the table where the notebook waits. I do not write. Not yet. Some plans need a darker, quieter tone than ink can provide. The hallway clock keeps its faithful lie and shows 2 minutes I will never get back. The house answers with its old chorus. A tick near the vent. A settling sigh along the joists. That sound is not sadness. It is a matter of finding the spot where it belongs. So I let my own weight find its place. If they want to measure me with papers, I will measure them with proof. If they intend to push me off my foundation, I will show them what happens when a foundation is real. I sit at the desk in my office and let the chair take my bones the way it has for 20 years. The blueprint on the wall holds steady. I can trace the truss in my mind without looking. Top chord, web, bottom chord, load paths that do not argue with gravity. My fingertips rest on the mouse. The laptop wakes. The screen lifts its pale light into a room that has chosen to remember me. The little camera eye blinks like a watchman coming on shift. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard protests under a foot and then goes quiet. I breathe once, as if the breath itself could sign a promise. Then I begin. An engineer does not break things. He studies where they will collapse. I sat with the laptop breathing its thin light and let my eyes move across the screen like a hand along a beam. Problems have load paths. So do betrayals. You do not attack the face of it. You find the joint that cannot bear what it is being asked to carry. I made a list in my notebook. Not numbers. Words that hold weight. Title. Access. Witness. Time. Under each, I wrote what I knew and what I needed to prove. The title lived in my file cabinet and in a courthouse scan. Access lived in my desk and in their heads. Witness needed to be someone who walked into a room and saw me standing up straight. Time whispered that plans like theirs depend on a calendar, and mine would depend on a clock that refuses to wait. I opened the folder where I keep paper that matters and placed each sheet on the desk like lumber on sawhorses. Deed, tax bill, insurance, old letters from a lender long paid. I did not touch what did not serve the moment. Every large build I ever led began with the same quiet. You set the pieces where you can see them. You walk the perimeter of your mind and measure without speaking. The cursor blinked while the search box waited. I typed slowly like I was laying chalk on a floor before the first cut. There are things the law does not take until it decides to take them. There is a window in which a man is still himself no matter who aims to say otherwise. I read until the words stopped being riddles and began to sound like an old rule I already understood. Until a judge speaks, the owner speaks for himself. That was the seam. Not a hole, a seam. And seams are made to be used if you know how not to tear them. I leaned back and let the room breathe with me. The blueprint on the wall watched like a teacher. I pulled a blank page and sketched a simple truss. 3 points for the truth I could not bend. I am competent. My name is the only name on the title. The court has not spoken. Between those points I drew web lines for the steps I would take. Documentation. Third party. A transaction that leaves no shadow. The drawing did not need labels. It needed honesty. My phone sat on the desk like a tool I had not loved for years. I scrolled to a number a neighbor once gave me when we had to notarize a boundary line. Evelyn Hart. I pressed call and counted my breaths while the ring moved through the dark. When she answered, her voice sounded like the clean click of a lever finding center. Are you sure you are ready for this, Mr. Lawson? I was ready the day my son stopped calling me Dad. There was a pause that felt like the right kind of respect. Tell me what you need, she said. Quiet work. Paper in order. a witness who does not flinch. I can be that, she said. And I know someone who can move quickly when the work is clean. I ended the call and sat with the silence that followed. The house ticked the way a body does when it cools. I gathered the documents and slid them into a plain folder. I did not hurry. The printer woke, fed by a careful hand, and the first page slid out with the sound of cloth tearing only a little. Copies for me. Copies for someone who will not lose them. I scanned each page and watched the progress bar inch forward like a patient crane. I recorded a short note in my notebook for a morning that would not be kind to liars. Verify identity. Confirm authority. Execute within the window the law leaves open for a man who is still himself. No numbers, no rates, no talk of value. A plan that respects the weight of what it must hold. The phone pulsed again. A message from Evelyn with a time and a location, and a reminder to bring a government photo. She had added one sentence that told me she understood the stakes without asking for a confession. If anyone is pressuring you, we can make this stop. I typed a reply I rarely send in this life. Thank you. Then I closed the thread and wrote the same 2 words by hand. Gratitude is a small beam that keeps a room from feeling like a cell. I stood and rolled my shoulders the way I did before a lift. Then I walked the house like a foreman who knows the morning will bring inspectors. I touched the places that taught me what it meant to build and to stay. The door frame where the pencil marks still show a boy's height in uneven years. The notch in the pantry shelf where a can fell once taught me to round an edge that catches more than light. I did not linger. Memory is a tool, but it is not a plan. By the window, I lifted the blind just enough to let a bar of streetlight cut across the table. Margaret used to stand here with a mug and call that stripe a ribbon. She said every night ties itself to the next if you let it. I let the slats fall and the ribbon disappeared. Then I returned to the desk and lifted the blueprint from its hook. I laid it flat and weighed the corners with my palms. The old lines held. The design stood because the math was honest. I traced the top chord once more and spoke to no one. I will not break anything. I will study where it collapses and ask it to do so quietly. The laptop cast its blue on my face and the printer answered with another slow page. I felt the plan settle into me the way a bridge settles onto piers once the false work is removed. Heavy. Right. True. I called the hotel I knew downtown and asked for a room under a name I had used when I traveled to sites where a project needed hands more than conversation. The clerk did not ask why a man would book in the middle of the night. Some people know better than to make a story for a stranger. I powered down the screen and the room tilted back toward the dark. On the way to the hall, I touched the light switch and left the office in a soft wash that showed only edges. From the kitchen, the clock offered its faithful lie, 2 minutes kinder than the truth. I let it keep that gift. My hand rested on the banister I had sanded smooth. Grain under skin, plan under heartbeat. I listened to the house settle one more time and heard in the quiet what I needed to hear. Not their voices. Not their plan. The smaller sound a builder waits for before he goes to work. The sound of weight finding its place. Selling your past is easier when it is the only way to keep your future. I left the house before the sun dared to touch the street. The folder rode in the passenger seat like a quiet passenger whose only job was to be present. I did not look in the mirror. A man who knows the window is open does not waste it checking his face. Evelyn Hart's office sat between a tack shop and a nail place where the neon flickered even in daylight. Inside it smelled like paper and toner and something clean, almost citrus. She checked my ID and watched me the way a level watches a line. Her questions were careful. Mine were simpler. What can be done without a parade? She spread the documents across the table the way a surgeon lays instruments in the order of use. Deed, signature page, affidavit of identity. She tapped each with a pen as if counting ribs. People will say you ran away, she said. No, I said. I just moved faster. The corner of her mouth almost found a smile. She stamped the first page and the sound was a small, satisfying thud. Ink met paper with authority. The seal left its raised circle like a coin pressed into soft earth. There is a kind of power that does not raise its voice. It sits in the imprint and lets the light find it. We kept our voices low. She asked where the funds should land when the work was done. Somewhere quiet, I said. Somewhere I already know how to lock. My old company name came up from the bottom of the lake in my memory. Lawson Structures, LLC, a thing I closed when the last project wrapped. Still registered, still mine. Use it, she said. The distance it gives is respectable, not theatrical. I nodded once. I prefer respectable to theatrical. She made a call I did not need to hear. When she hung up, she slid a business card across the table. Discreet escrow officer. Moves quickly when the work is clean. Bring this folder and nothing else. You do not want left in the room. We finished the signatures and she arranged the pages into 2 stacks, twin and tidy. She offered a final line that felt like a hand held palm up, not palm out. If anyone is pressuring you, we will make it stop here. I told her pressure makes diamonds or cracks. Today, it will do neither. At the bank, I requested a business checking account for Lawson Structures, LLC. The manager wore a tie the color of a low sky, and the kind of patience that belongs to people who handle other people's relief. I signed where he pointed and declined what I did not need. Paperless statements, a mailing address that is a box and not a porch, a debit card I will never use. He asked about expected activity, and I answered with a sentence that revealed nothing and everything. Intermittent, clean, purposeful. He nodded like he had heard that exact flavor of caution before. In the lobby, I sat with my phone and set up a separate inbox and a cloud folder that does not share with anything except itself. I took pictures of the notarized pages and watched as each image tucked itself into a vault no one in this house knows exists. A man learns after enough storms to store his dry matches where wind cannot find them. The escrow office was quieter than a church. The receptionist spoke with the soft competence of someone who knows a secret and refuses to make it interesting. In a glass room, the officer laid out the initial packet. Identity verification. Opening instructions. The first thin stack of what would become a file with a spine. We verified my authority with the efficiency of people who respect time. He asked about communication preferences. Email only. No calls to my home. He made a note in neat block letters and underlined it once. I signed my name the way a man draws a line under a chapter. Not for show, for closure. The officer pressed his stamp and the seal rose on the paper again. The small circle looked like a moon with something to say. I felt the quiet move in behind me and sit in the chair where fear had been. Work clean, he said. We will. He stood and walked the pages to a scanner that hummed like a well-tuned motor. Copies for you, he said when he returned. I slid them into the folder and closed it with a hand that did not shake. Outside, the light had changed. Afternoon leaned long across the lot. I got in the truck and let the engine find its rhythm. The phone stayed dark face down on the seat. The tires bumped over the lip of the driveway and the city gave way to a road that pointed itself at open land. The desert has a way of making truth look obvious. Creosote rock, a sky that forgets how to stop. I drove toward that forgetfulness without music. The air through the vents smelled like hot plastic and dust that is older than apology. I thought about the first stamp and the second. Their weight compared to all the shouting some people use to call a thing final. The right kind of ending does not need an audience. It needs a mark that will outlast breath. Red dust lifted in small ghosts behind the truck and fell back to the earth like a promise kept to itself. On the horizon, the line of mountains held still. I matched their stillness and let the miles turn under me. At a pullout, I stopped and stepped into heat that felt honest. The folder stayed on the seat. I did not need to look at it to know what it contained. The plan was no longer an idea. It was ink and seal and a string of quiet people who would do their part without wearing the story on their faces. I leaned against the warm fender and watched a line of ants rearrange a grain of sand 3 times until it sat right. There is dignity in small corrections. Dusk came in stages the way all good endings do. The sky tried on bruised purple, then settled into a deeper blue that invited headlights without apology. I got back in and turned toward the city before the dark could ask questions. The phone buzzed once, and I let it. When silence returned, it felt like permission. Some battles are won by volume. Mine would be won by a seal and a window of time used exactly as it was meant to be used. By the time I reached the hotel, the air had cooled, and the world had the polite hush it takes on right before people go inside and close doors. I parked under a light that did not flicker. I carried the folder like a tool that had finished its job for the day. At the front desk, the clerk asked for a name, and I gave him one that belonged to work and not to family. He handed me a keycard that weighed almost nothing and pointed down a hall that smelled faintly of lemon and new carpet. I nodded and walked the quiet length without turning back. Justice does not always need a speech. Sometimes it needs a table, a stamp, a pen that does not run, and a man who knows when to say enough. They laughed over dinner, not knowing they were toasting their own defeat. Steam rose from the roast and made a little weather over the table. The holiday lights we kept along the window blinked in slow patterns, red, then gold, like a heartbeat that did not belong to any of us. The television in the living room murmured about a game no one was truly watching. We ate like a family that had nothing to worry about. That was the point. I moved more slowly than usual and let them see it. I reached for the salt, paused halfway, and looked at my hand the way a man looks at a tool he has used too long. Lydia watched from behind the rim of her glass. She smiled in the way people do when they have replaced patience with plans. I asked if the serving spoon was in the second drawer or the third. It has always been in the third. I opened the second and looked at what I was not looking for. The drawer made its small wooden gasp and closed. Lucas cut the roast with neat strokes. He talked about a contractor from his office and a weekend trip that sounded more like a strategy than a rest. He leaned back in his chair and wore that calm he uses when he wants me to agree to a future he has already written. "Maybe it is time we took care of things for you," he said. "That is exactly what I am doing," I said. His fork stopped for the length of a breath. Then he smiled and went back to his plate. People hear only the parts of a sentence that confirm what they want to believe. I let a small silence sit between us, and then I filled it with a harmless error. I asked if pickup day was Wednesday when all three of us know the cans go to the curb on Tuesday. Lydia corrected me gently. She placed a hand on my wrist as if to steady something that was not moving. I thanked her and set my water on a coaster that was not there. The ring it left on the wood will dry. Some marks should be left for a while so you remember what made them. The pocket watch in my vest rested warm against my ribs. It is an old thing from my father, heavy and sure. During dinner, I rolled the crown between two fingers and felt the click of each tooth. The watch keeps better time than the clocks in this house. Tonight, I did not ask it to keep anything. I turned it back 2 minutes so it could match the hall clock that refuses to meet the present. It is good to let a lie run a step ahead when you need it to pull a story where you want it to go. We cleared plates. I took mine to the sink and stood for a moment with my hands under warm water that ran clean over nothing. I pretended to forget the soap. Lydia reached past my shoulder and squeezed a line of it onto the sponge. Her voice had that brightness people use when they want the room to believe in their kindness. She told Lucas to bring the dessert. He brought it with a flourish that tried too hard to look casual. The knife slid through the crust and found the heat at the center. He served me a larger piece than he used to. I ate it slowly and nodded as if to bless a feast they had not earned. I asked about our neighbor 2 houses down, the one with the blue truck, and gave him the wrong name. Lucas corrected me without looking up. The correction tasted sweet on his tongue. He is a good boy when he is correcting someone. I watched him enjoy it. A small pleasure for a young man who believes the road ahead is free of holes. We carried coffee to the living room. The tree we keep simple most years had grown loud with ornaments. Lydia likes sparkle when company is likely. The bulbs reflected our faces in their curves and bent us into small shapes that looked almost kind. Lucas told a story about a childhood camping trip he barely remembers, and somehow the story made him the brave one, and me the man who needed instruction. I laughed in the right places and let the edges of the memory soften. He looked relieved that I did not fix the details. The pocket watch tapped against the inside of my coat. That sound is a thin metronome that only I can hear. I counted 10 beats and stood to take my empty cup to the kitchen. On the way, I set my phone on the refrigerator shelf beside the milk and closed the door. I came back and sat down. Lydia found it later and announced it like a discovery. I let my mouth shape a small apology and patted my pocket as if I had expected it to be there. Some performances require one prop and the right audience. Lucas leaned forward. His voice softened, which for him is the same as pressure. "Dad, the roof needs work and taxes do not get cheaper. And it might be best if we handle some of this." I watched the lights on the window make a slow red ladder on the floor. I said, "I am handling what is mine." He sat back, satisfied with the message he thought I was sending. It is easy to win a game you are not actually playing. They laughed over something small and harmless and raised their glasses a little higher than the joke deserved. The sound of glass on glass is delicate, the way a truth is delicate right before someone puts it down too hard. I let that sound ring once, and then I stood and thanked them for dinner. I said I would go check the hall thermostat. No one questioned it. A man my age is allowed a few routines that do not need explaining. Upstairs, I moved down the hallway with a hand on the wall that has always known my hand. I stepped into my room and closed the door without letting the latch click. The house below continued to perform a language of clatter and small laughter. I sat on the edge of the bed and took the pocket watch out and placed it in my palm. It lay there like a proof. I could feel the tiny engine counting what it was given. The second hand crept almost like a secret. I opened the watch and nudged the crown again. 2 minutes back. Now the hall clock and the watch agreed, and neither told the truth. I was the only honest timekeeper in the building. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the home settle itself after a meal. Somewhere a fork met a plate. Somewhere a cabinet shut a little too firmly. I breathed and let the room find its softest shape. The clink of glasses drifted up and then faded into a thinner echo. What was left was the steady click in my hand and the quiet I had chosen as my weapon. At dawn, I handed over my keys, not in surrender but in strategy. The sky was still the color of steel left out overnight. I moved through the kitchen without turning on a light and listened to the house breathe one last time. The keys rested on my palm like small teeth. They had opened every good year and every hard one. Today they would open the part where I walk away, because that is how you keep what cannot be taken. The buyer's agent met me on the porch with a clipboard and a steady nod. We kept our words plain. We checked the lockbox code, the entry list, and the initials on the final page that waited in his folder. He asked if there were any lingering issues. I said no, the place stands as it was built to stand. He held out the envelope that would carry my keys to a new pocket. I slid them inside and sealed it with a thumb that did not shake. "It is official, Mr. Lawson," he said. "So is my freedom," I said. He looked at me for a beat the way a man looks at a bridge he does not understand but has decided to trust. He did not argue with relief. He made a neat note beside my name and thanked me for making this simple. I told him that simple is what you get when you plan long before anyone notices you started. My phone sat in my breast pocket, camera open, lens peeking through cloth. I prefer proof to memory. The handover and the final signatures lived in silent color as the minute ticked past. No flourish, no stage, only a record of a man standing where he needed to stand while the last piece slid into place. When we were done, I walked to the truck and let the upload run. A gray bar moved left to right. Another copy stepped into a folder that only Evelyn and I could see. I typed a single line and pressed send. Evidence secured. The house behind me wore its neutral face. Blinds, still glass, cleaned the paint along the trim, catching the thin morning. I did not touch the door. You cannot keep a thing by clinging to it. You keep it by knowing when it is finished doing its job. The engine turned over. The tires made their small sound against the curb as I eased away. In the rear view, the porch light I had switched off before dawn looked like a last thought that decided to stay quiet. I watched the roofline recede the angle I had chosen when I drew it on paper years back, climbing down the mirror inch by inch. Margaret once stood on that porch in a winter coat and said, "This place looks like a promise. Promises keep different shapes as you age. Some shrink to a ring of metal on a chain. Some widen into a long, empty road that asks for your hand on the wheel and nothing else. On the main street, the sun lifted its shoulder over the far roofs. Heat would come later, mean and clean. For now, the air had a cold that kept you honest. I drove without music. The truck knew every bump. The city eased into work, and the day took on a pace I recognized from job sites, where the only thing that mattered was the next correct step. At the first red light, I checked the upload. Complete. I forwarded the video and the stills to Evelyn with a brief note. Handover recorded copies stored witness present. I attached scans of the stamped pages from yesterday and the acknowledgement signed 15 minutes earlier on the porch. For her records. For mine. For a judge who might need to see a quiet man doing legal work in legal light. I turned left and the house dropped from the mirror. There is a second when a place disappears and it takes a breath with it. The body wants it back. You let that pass. I watched the road and counted the poles as they blinked by. 10, 20, 30. Measuring calms the part of you that wants to reach into the past and pull. I let the poles do their job and kept the truck straight. At a gas station, I pulled in for no reason but the ritual of it. I cleaned the windshield with a slow hand and watched the streaks fade. A boy no older than Lucas, at 14, held the door for a woman carrying coffee. I stood still and let the picture file itself under a word I do not use often. Ordinary. Then I got back in and went on. By late morning, I reached the hotel. The clerk nodded with recognition and slid a fresh key card across the counter. The hallway smelled like lemon and vacuum lines wrote tidy rows on the carpet. In the room, I set the folder on the desk and opened the curtains halfway. Light fell at an angle that made the papers look official, even without a stamp. The video sat in the cloud with a sensible name. The copies sat on the drive with a stranger's calm. I sent a short message to Evelyn. Confirmed. She replied with 2 words that carried enough weight. Well done. I sat on the bed with my hands open and let the quiet stand up around me. Choices make a room feel larger. The keys were gone to another life, and the pockets of my coat felt simpler. I thought about the sound they used to make when I set them on the table after work. Margaret called it the day coming home. Today the day had gone out, and I felt no panic in its leaving. Lucas and Lydia would make plans based on a house they considered a stepping stone. They believed in fixed ground that belonged to them because they wanted it to. There is nothing kinder to a liar than a familiar room. Taking the room away is not cruelty. It is clarity. When they looked for me tonight, they would find the hall clock still 2 minutes behind and the kitchen organized as always. They would not find what they expected to own. The defeat would be silent at first. Then it would get loud. That is not my problem to solve. I closed the curtains another inch and the room shifted towards soft gray. The phone lay face up on the desk. I did not wait for it to ring. A man who has already answered the only question that matters does not need further conversation. On the screen, the still frame from the porch showed a hand placing keys into an envelope. There was no drama in it. That is the point. Justice often looks like neat paperwork and a sealed flap pressed flat with a calm thumb. I lay back and watched the ceiling hold steady. Breathing returned to its even work. There is a line between a man who has something to lose and a man who has chosen what he will not surrender. By stepping over it, I did not become smaller. I became exact. When you leave the right way, the ones who meant to take do not know they have already lost until the light changes and the room will not open for them anymore. At noon on Christmas Eve, my son called pretending concern. I let it ring 3 times. The hotel room held a polite quiet, curtains half open. Winter light turned the carpet the color of soft stone. I watched the name on the screen and waited for the last ring to finish its circle. Then I answered like a man picking up a tool he knows well. Dad, where are you? People are asking. We have plans. I kept my voice even. Go to my study, top right drawer. There is an envelope with your name. Read it where no one can see your face. Silence. Cloth against the phone. Breathing that carried the weight of a man walking down a hall he thought he owned. Floorboards in my mind. The click of the drawer. The faint scrape of paper. A pause that had no air in it. What is this? The envelope held 2 things. A copy of the sale documents and a note written in my hand. The note told him the property he planned to steal was never his. He read no further. Sound filled the line. The first thing that breaks in a house is not wood. It is the story people tell themselves about control. You cannot do this to us. His voice came up sharp and thin. It tried to sound like authority and came out like panic wearing a tie. I already did. Legally, cleanly, quietly. Lydia asked something in the background. The way a person asks when the floor has moved and they want the air to agree that nothing has happened. Lucas covered the mouthpiece and failed to cover anything at all. The line carried everything. Footsteps. A glass tipped over. Guests speaking in soft confusion. The sound of a life coming apart does not roar. It frays. You were not in your right mind. Someone took advantage of you. We can fix this. We will fix this now. You tried to take what is not yours using signatures you did not earn. I protected what is mine using signatures I did. How could you sell the house without telling us? Because it was my house. Because I am still myself. Because you forgot what patience knows how to do. He tried another door. You will regret this. Regret lives in rooms where people lie to themselves with comfort. I am not there. I let the quiet do its work. On my side of the glass, the city breathed through the window seam. Sunlight drew a pale ladder on the desk. I could see my hand resting open beside the phone. The skin along the knuckles looked like a map through weather and work. Steady. Present. Not done. Come home. We will discuss this like a family. We discussed it when you decided paperwork could erase me. That meeting is over. I set the phone on the desk and pressed speaker. I do not need proof to believe myself. I collected it anyway. The voice memo app opened with that small red circle, which means memory will not have to do all the lifting. Lucas was still speaking. He had switched to the tone used on subcontractors who have not delivered. His mistake was thinking a father takes orders the way a hired hand does. Dad listens to me. You are confused. This will be reversed. We will file and the court will agree. I walked to the window. From 7 floors up, the street looked like careful lines on a plan. People crossed intersections in neat diagonals. A woman held a child by the hand, and the child swung one arm like a bell. The world did not even blink. Check the letter again, I said. Look at the date. Look at the seal. Look at the acknowledgement that says a witness stood there and saw me standing there. If you want to keep speaking, choose words that will not embarrass you later. There was a long scrape. A chair moved. The door to my study closed. He tried to lower his voice. It is not final. It cannot be. You are being manipulated. By who? By people who want your money. The only person who wanted my money was the son trying to convert his father into a file. He exhaled in a way that used to be a laugh when he was a boy. It was not a laugh now. You are cruel. You are abandoning us on Christmas Eve. I am not abandoning anyone. I am declining to be used. The sound of a glass breaking traveled the line. A single clean ring and then small skittering pieces. Someone said, "It is fine, it is fine." Someone said, "Call him back, call him back." It was not fine. I reduced the volume 1 notch and let the room be gentle again. I will see you in court, he said. His last refuge. A room with a flag where he believed performance could become fact. You will see me sitting upright and answering the questions without effort. That is all you will see. I ended the call. My thumb found the red square and stopped the recording. The file was saved and the screen returned to the face of the room. I sent the audio to the folder that already held what mattered. Then I sat on the chair by the window and let the thin sun press its hand against my shoulder. The letter is on white paper. Black words that do not apologize. The border between true and false is not loud. It is crisp. A copy of a legal transfer. A line in my handwriting that does not tremble. There is mercy in clean lines. They remove the need for performance. A knock at the door sounded faintly in the memory of my house. I would not open it. I did not have to. The keys lived with someone else now, and the door did not know my hand. The distance felt like a decision being honored. I poured water from the small bottle on the desk and drank half, the taste of plastic and something mineral. My heart stayed measured. I looked at the skyline and counted the windows that had the same light as mine. People eating. People wrapping gifts. People choose their tone. Before the next hour ended, my phone would fill with efforts to turn back time. Time does not turn. It travels. A pocket watch taught me that long before a judge ever would. The phone buzzed again, and I let it. I turned the screen face down and listened to the small sound of it settling into the wood. The message would wait with the others. I wrote a single sentence in my notebook. The truth speaks loudest when you do not raise your voice. Then I closed the cover and let the room be exactly what it was. Quiet. Bright. Mine. They called me insane. The court called me something else. Competent. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and patience. Fluorescent lights hummed in that flat way that makes time feel longer. I sat at the table with my hands open and my spine straight, like every safety briefing I ever gave before a lift that mattered. On the other side, Lucas and Lydia sat close enough to look like a unit. Their faces carried a rehearsed worry. It did not reach their eyes. The clerk read a list of filings in a voice that belonged to paper. My counsel spoke first. He set down a simple stack. Evaluations from 3 physicians who actually met me. Notes were recorded the week of the handover. A copy of the timeline I had written when the house still believed I would live there another season. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Truth does not ask for volume. Their attorney stood and tried to shape fog into furniture. He said I acted impulsively. He said I had been coached. He said the holiday made me fragile. He avoided saying what he needed to say, that I was capable. A story that cannot say that sentence will chew on every other word until it swallows itself. The judge asked for the court-appointed examiner. A woman in a dark suit came forward with a folder that had been opened so many times the edges had started to soften. She spoke with the clarity of someone who knows the difference between opinion and measurement. She said my cognitive testing fell within a range that does not frighten anyone. She said my answers tracked. She said I knew what I owned, what I signed, and why. She used words like intact and sound. I listened the way you listen to a bridge you trust while you drive a heavy truck across it, calmly, with gratitude held low and steady where it cannot spill. Their attorney tried to thread a needle between those sentences. He asked if grief can hide in a competent mind. The examiner said yes, and then added that grief does not equal incapacity. He asked if older adults can be manipulated. She said yes, and then added that belief does not make it so. He asked if sudden decisions are suspect. She said sudden is not a diagnosis. The air in the room cooled by a degree. Then the judge did something that cleared the fog. He called for the physician whose name sat at the bottom of the paper that arrived in my trash. Grant Ellison. The door at the side opened, and a man I used to know walked in wearing a tie he had not chosen. He sat at a witness table that made the wood look expensive and the truth feel cheap. He answered softly. He said he had not examined me in years. He said he had not written the phrases that marched across the page under his signature. He said the signature did look like his. He also said he could not place the day he would have signed it because he had not. A copy of the form went up on the screen. The judge leaned forward. My counsel traced a box with a small light. The date line. The witness line. The tiny misprint that matched a batch from a clinic where Lydia used to temp. Their attorney shifted in his shoes. Lucas stared at a spot on the table as if sheer concentration might turn it into a door. The judge asked Ellison how his name appeared on a document he did not author. Ellison said he had reported his pad stolen 2 months prior. He said a stack of blanks had gone missing in a week that had no other story he could remember. He said he had notified his office but not the board. He looked smaller with each sentence. My counsel clicked to the next page. The same signature. Then a third. The judge did not speak for a long time. The gavel sat in his hand like an option. He has not used it yet. Their attorney tried to find a purchase. He asked whether my son could have believed in good faith that I was unwell. He asked whether a daughter-in-law can be misled by a doctor. The room listened out of habit. The habit faded. Belief is not a bridge. It is a story about a bridge. The judge turned to me. Mr. Lawson, anything you would like to say? I stood. Only this, I said. Engineering taught me one truth. Weak foundations always fail. I sat. No more than that. Everyone heard the rest anyway. The judge lowered his eyes to the file and raised them to the room. He spoke in measures. He said the petition for guardianship was denied. He said the court found no evidence of incapacity. He said my conduct in selling a thing I owned before any order existed was lawful. Then he looked at the papers again and let the weight of a new decision settle. He said there was probable cause that medical documents had been falsified. He said the record would be referred to the county attorney for review. He said the names involved would be included. The gavel came down once. It was not loud. It did not need to be. That sound traveled through the benches and the paneled walls and the hollow places where a lie had been living. You could hear it land in the silence the way a beam seats itself onto stone. Final. correct, unimpressed by the noise that came before it. Lydia covered her mouth with a hand that wore a ring I paid for long ago. Lucas stared at the screen where his plan had just become evidence. He looked young in a way that does not invite anyone to help. Their attorney collected his papers with more motion than necessary. My counsel closed his folder like a book that ends clean. We stood when the judge left the bench. People forget the choreography of respect until the world teaches it back to them. I felt Evelyn's hand touch my elbow only once as we turned toward the aisle. The contact was not comfortable. It was an acknowledgement. Work completed to spec. In the hallway the sound was brighter, shoes on marble, a vending machine humming its indifferent song. I walked to the door that opens to the steps and pushed it with the flat of my palm. The sun met me without ceremony, white light on white stone, the kind that makes a man blink and then see more clearly. Behind the glass, voices rose and fell. I did not turn to read them. I do not read old plans after demolition is approved. I stood on the landing and let the air do its steady work. A bus sighed at the curb. A pigeon angled its head as if considering a bid. The city kept moving like a well-timed crane. The door closed gently behind me. The sound of the court faded into the morning like the tail of a truck crossing a bridge you trust. I took the first step down and then the second, each one a simple answer to gravity. Truth has weight. It falls slowly. It lands exactly where it is meant to. They lost everything they tried to steal and learned nothing from it. That is how some stories end when the lesson is refused. It did not happen all at once. It arrived in pieces the way winter comes to the desert, a colder morning here, a harsher wind. There nothing dramatic until the day the light feels different, and you realize it has been different for weeks. The first piece came by email on a Tuesday. Subject line is simple and tired. Employment status update. Human resources language that tried to be kind. The company appreciated his service. The position was eliminated due to concerns arising from public records. No mention of the hearing. No mention of forged papers. Just the polite end of a ladder he had climbed and borrowed shoes. I read it twice and filed it in a folder named for the month. I did not forward it to anyone. A record does not need an audience to be true. On Thursday, a message from my counsel arrived with attachments that looked like they wanted to apologize for existing. The court clerk had processed costs and damages, numbers on a page that did not change my breathing. The note suggested I could set a payment plan if I wished. I wrote back one sentence asking that all receipts be sent to my email, not my door. Some doors are better left to sunlight and wind. A letter followed with real ink, postmarked from an apartment complex I did not know. Lydia wrote in a hand that once addressed birthday cards. She said she had moved out. She said the stress had become a river that would not return to its banks. She did not use the word divorce. She did not need to. Between her lines, I could hear a suitcase unzipping and a silence that had started to speak in two rooms where one used to be enough. I folded the paper once and placed it in the file with the others. There is dignity in keeping a record without ceremony. The next week, Evelyn called as I was pouring coffee. The room held that morning stillness that happens when a plan has finished its work and the day has not yet asked for anything. She said the clerk would issue the check by Friday. She said I could have it routed any way I wanted. I told her I would pick it up in person. She paused, then offered a line that held both care and practicality. You could keep the money. I already have what they never will piece. There was a small exhale on the other end of the line. She said she understood. Friday arrived in a coat of thin sun. I walked to the office and signed a receipt that curled at the edges from the heat of the printer. The check sat under glass for a moment while the clerk verified what clerks verify. When she slid it to me, it felt lighter than I expected. Paper can still carry a stone. I thanked her and left with it pressed inside a plain folder, the same sort of folder that had held other truths on other days. At home in the hotel room that did not yet know me well, I set the folder on the table and opened it to the afternoon. The check shone a little where the numbers lived. I looked at it the way you look at a bridge after traffic is gone, not with triumph, with respect for a design that held. I took out my notebook and wrote a name I had been holding since the hearing. Silverline Foundation. They do quiet work that never makes the news. They place their hands where older hands have been pushed away. They teach families the difference between help and control. I called their office and a woman with a steady voice answered. She thanked me before she knew why I was calling, which told me enough about the work. I asked for a mailing address and a name for the memo line. She gave me both and wished me a gentle afternoon. The wish landed. I sat a while with the check in one hand and a clean envelope in the other. Sunlight moved a little across the table, thinner and warmer as the hour changed. I filled the envelope slowly, printing the address with the care you give to words you do not want lost. In the memo, I wrote 2 words: for protection. My hand did not shake. The table took my weight without complaint. The phone buzzed against the wood and walked a tiny half-inch. A text from an unknown number told me Lucas was looking for me. The message said he wanted to talk. It said he had made mistakes. It said he was ready to make things right. It did not say how only that the attempt to say it felt like trying to rebuild a span with rope and hope. I set the phone face down and made no reply. Some bridges cannot be repaired because the river itself has changed. Later, an email arrived from a clerk at a court I hope to never see again. It used a phrase I have learned to respect: further action pending. It referred to the forged medical forms and the review that would follow. The words did not taste like revenge. They tasted like gravity. When enough weight is applied where it should be, a thing goes where it was always going to go. Evening light leaned in through the window and made the room honest. I took out the pocket watch and set it on the table beside the envelope. I listened to its patient counting, and then I moved the minute hand forward, exactly the amount the hall clock at the house always refused. There was no one here to reconcile against no lie to match for strategic reasons. I did it for myself. Time keeps better when you admit what it is. Evelyn called again as the room began to shade toward gray. She asked if I wanted a copy of the receipt for my records. I said yes and thanked her. Then she said it once more in case I had changed my mind. You could keep the money. I already have what they never will piece. She was quiet for a heartbeat and then wished me a good night. I thanked her for the work that stayed within the lines. When I hung up, I addressed the envelope and sealed it with the same thumb I had used to close other work. The adhesive caught and held. I wrote my return address in a hand that belonged to a man who still knows how to print and measure and insist on clean corners. Then I placed the envelope in the center of the table and watched the light climb it. The paper warmed, the room cooled. Somewhere a child on the street below laughed and the sound rose like a small bell. They lost everything they tried to steal. In the end, the lesson did not find them. It found me again the way it has all my life. Build what holds, record what matters, give away what would only weigh you down. I slid the envelope into my bag and let my palm rest on the table for one breath longer than needed. Then I stood. The day had done its work. The sun laid a thin gold bar across the wood. I walked out with that bar on my shoulder and left the room to keep the quiet I had earned. At sunrise, my coffee did not taste like revenge. It tasted like peace. Steam lifted in thin ribbons and disappeared into a room that did not demand anything from me. The window held a pale wash of light. Somewhere a bird announced the hour with the kind of certainty only small creatures can afford. I wrapped both hands around the cup and let the heat tell my bones they had survived the night. My breathing met the morning like an equal. The table kept yesterday's order. Notebook closed. Pocket watch resting face up. A plain envelope stamped and gone. No noise in the hallway. No footsteps that believed they owned the floor. I took a slow sip and felt something loosen that had been tight for months. Regret did not rise. Anger did not ask to be heard. Just a simple warmth moving through a man who had made hard choices and was still himself. The phone stirred on the desk and walked a finger's length on the wood. A small deposit notification glowed on the screen. The name attached to it was not a stranger. The memo line carried 2 words I had once waited years to hear and no longer required. I am sorry. The amount was not large. The weight of it was exactly right for what I needed to do next. I let the message settle into the room. Then I opened the app and moved the money forward without letting it cool. Same day. Full amount. Silver Line Foundation. In the note, I wrote the same 2 words I have trusted my entire life. For protection. Forgiveness is not about letting them in. It is about letting the pain out. I do not owe the past a chair at my table. I owe the future a quiet place to set a cup down and drink it while it is still warm. The watch ticked. That measured sound has always reminded me that time is not a judge. It is a road. I lifted the crown and allowed the minute hand to meet truth. No need to keep company with a faithful lie anymore. I closed the case and felt the weight return to my palm. The metal held the last of my wife's touch and my father's lessons. Keep the line plumb. Square the corner. Trust the measure you took with your own hands. I stood and walked to the window. The city moved in soft patterns. People with bags, people with dogs. A man in a coat too thin for the morning hurrying nowhere worth rushing to. I watched long enough to remember that my story belongs to me again. Then I rinsed the cup. Water ran clear. The steam faded. Peace stayed put. I drove toward Red Rock Country with nothing on the passenger seat but a small key that had lived too long in my pocket. The road knew its own curve. Light spread across the flats and lifted itself along the edges of stone. I rolled the window down and let the air clean the last of the stale out of me. There is a kind of silence you only find when the earth itself is speaking. Tires on pavement, wind moving in a rhythm older than grief. The steady hum tells you the machine is working as designed. At the overlook, the world opened the way a curtain opens when the play you came to see is finally ready to begin. The canyon did not perform for me. It simply existed at a scale that refused pettiness. I stood at the rail and held the key between thumb and forefinger. It was a small thing. Brass worn smooth by doors that understood me once. It had teeth enough to shape a life, and now it had no work left to do. I did not make a speech. I do not believe in speeches at the end. I held the key over the drop and waited for the breath that tells a man he is finished with a tool. When it came, I let the metal fall. It turned once and caught a short blade of light. Then it vanished into scrub and red shadow. There was no dramatic clatter, only the honest hush that follows a decision. Clouds slowed the sun for a moment, and the canyon changed color like a chest rising and falling. I stood there with empty fingers and felt nothing leave me. The leaving had already happened. What remained was mine. A name that still fits. A mind that does not wander without permission. A body that knows how to be still when stillness is the strongest move. On the drive back, I kept the radio off. Memory tried to make its case, and I let it present exhibits until it ran out of paper. A boy in a cardboard helmet? Yes. A woman laughing in a kitchen with paint on her wrists? Yes. A son choosing ruin over humility? Yes. I did not rule against any of it. I simply declined to reopen the file. The road laid out its calm logic, and I followed. By late morning, the room welcomed me as if it had been watching the door without needing to. I set the watch on the table and wrote a single line in the notebook. Today I carried nothing I do not need. Then I closed the cover and let the pen rest where it belongs. The phone was quiet. It could remain that way for as long as it wished. I brewed another cup and stood at the window while the steam lifted again. The second coffee did not taste like victory. It tasted like steadiness, like clear water after hard work. Outside, a child let go of a parent's hand and ran in a small circle simply because there was enough space to run. Space is a gift you give yourself after you stop trying to hold what does not want to stay. The sun found the rim of the neighboring roof and poured itself down the side. Warmth reached my knuckles. I thought about courts and seals and the noise of people who believe noise is a plan. None of that belonged here. What belonged was this quiet and the responsibility that comes with it. Live clean, keep records, speak when necessary, measure twice. Justice is not a show. It is a beam seating itself onto stone. It does not need applause. It needs a builder who understands weight and a morning that offers enough light to see the work. I took a breath that did not have to push past anything and let it all sit exactly where it belonged. Coffee, watch, open window, a day that asks for nothing more than honesty. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.